What is up, people? This is your RJ Karthik, and welcome to episode 7 of Attribution Radio. Crazy. We got some awesome guest speakers today on the pod, including Ken Sheehah, a predictive business analyst who specializes in geospatial modeling, Paul Baumgarthuber, a chief marketing officer at Laseraway, and Keary Phillips, the head of marketing at Wellknow Urgent Care. Check this out. You don't want to miss it.
Kerry and I had a quick prep call today morning. Paul, I also asked him, what do we call your category? Brick and mortar retail, local retail, and then we didn't land in a place. What is it? What is the category called? How would we teach this in class? Your type of marketing, what is it?
I would call it retail healthcare for probably
retail healthcare.
So it's and it's kind of the consumerism of healthcare is our model.
Okay, Paul, how do you describe the space, the marketing side? I mean, as a marketer, what is it? This is retail marketing? Is it local marketing? What is it for you?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with Kerry because, we are kind of constrained as to how we can market. Like can't retarget on Google because we're a sensitive category, all that fun stuff. So we're kind of shoehorned into that medical category, despite the fact that we don't do anything invasive or anything like that.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay.
And a little bit of the difference between perhaps like urgent care versus medical aesthetics, which is maybe more where Paul's business sits, is that we are very much a demand capture business because we don't influence when people get sick, when they sprain their ankle. We just want to make sure that we are there as, kind of the number one consideration for them. We know they need to know that we're in their community. They need to know when we're open to be able to meet their variable needs. So it's a little bit different. We don't do price promotions or discounts or anything. It's all about access and convenience and making sure that everyone in any market that we're in is, overtly aware that we're there to serve them.
If we jump in, I don't think I gave a proper intro to you. I think folks, of course, know Paul because he's been in class. So Keary Phillips, dear friend of mine, he was my client from many years. So there's a lot of visual IQ people here, Keary. Some of these folks may have worked on your account from your time in Allstate. So he was our client at Allstate.
9 or whatever it was, yeah.
11 or 12, I would say.
That's right. It was a little late.
10 plus years back. So I met Kerry at a conference and I asked him, invited him to class, and he was kind enough to accept. So you are a CMO at Aspen Dental, but maybe you can describe your role. How would you describe what you do there?
Sure. Within Aspen Dental, I support their urgent care business. So Aspen Dental is a series of different brands that are all oriented around various aspects of healthcare, some of them more tangentially than others, whether it's dental or medical aesthetics, or we're getting into kind of a veterinary business. And then urgent care is sort of the, probably the purest play healthcare entity within the overall Aspen Group portfolio. And my responsibility really encompasses all marketing and patient experience. So, kind of the website touch points, a lot of the in-clinic experience when people get there, what are we presenting to them while they're waiting?
Okay.
Pretty much all those different aspects. And then demand capture, driving visit volume is kind of the other piece of it. In addition to
you have a big portion of the customer experience too, as part of the, that's a significant portion of the responsibility. Okay, let me also introduce Ken. So Ken and I have worked together before at Measured. He's a researcher in geographical information systems. At least that's the way I experience him. He's a doctorate. He also did a postdoctorate. He did a lot of research in that. He worked for the U.S. Geological Survey, and now he's an entrepreneur in this space. But Ken, maybe you can give who are you now? How would you describe yourself?
Sure. Of course, I'm wearing many hats like many of the folks here today, but I think at its core, what we do is every aspect of things that Kerry was mentioning that his company touches on. And we're all talking about audience and efficiency to sale. So what Nowhere does is utilizes a whole suite of statistics that are not typically used in business ecosystem modeling to get a greater efficiency to sale. And so there's a cusp and a dynamic change in marketing, and the marketing ecosystem. Attribution measured was part of that, as everyone here knows. And you're pushing that forward even now, like with what we're doing here in these discussions. And so where Knower sits in that is often behind the scenes. So we take the data, we look at it in new ways, we aggregate it, we create new data sources, we leverage free data sources, which we can talk about today, and then we make everyone's efficiency to sale better and identify areas where we can optimize that you may be leaving money on the table, right? It's all about getting better results with that audience or cohorts that you're working with.
So I think if I add a spin on that, so he's an expert on census data. So he understands census data like the back of his hand. So the US government puts a lot of data on household incomes by neighborhoods and all the stuff around if there are water bodies near the neighborhood, schools, what kind of schools, and a bunch of other information that's just meant for public research purposes. Very hard to like really synthesize it for purposes outside of what government has actually meant to use it for. Now he is trying to take that data and make it available for marketing purposes. And now I'm working on with him with a couple of clients where we're doing zip level holdout testing and zip level scale testing. And he's able to identify, like typically, let's say, for example, a typical DTC brand is about 42,000 zip codes. Their entire business in the last 3 or 4 years may be only in about 2,000, 3,000 zip codes. Now, there's another 2,000, 3,000 zip codes that could represent an additional 2x of your business that has never been, like you haven't seen any sales there. We don't know why. So he identifies those zip codes and he helps kind of target those zip codes and, like, of course, grow your business. So you can kind of finds these little pockets of demand. When you look at the world through a different lens, through the census data lens, all of a sudden you find all these pockets of demand, and he's an expert. I mean, he's trying to build a business around that. So I thought a lot of local businesses like Keary and Paul trying to bring Ken into the conversation might be a fun kind of sort of a mix of cocktail of opinions we can bring together. Okay, that's a setup. I have a few questions to tee off the discussion. Okay, let me start with this. Paul, I've been a big fan, especially I'm a big fan of marketers, leaders like you who are very data forward naturally. It's not like I grew up as a data scientist and then eventually became like a product and entrepreneur and whatnot. But I came from a very different path through this, right? You come from a very different practitioner path to the space, but you have a natural orientation for data and data strategy. Okay, and I've talked to you many times, and as I'm explaining a really complex concept, you automatically are kind of figuring out the strategy for how to take this insight and put that in market. What is that? Is that a data culture thing? Is that just an individual thing? What is that thing?
I don't know. I've kind of always been curious about how things work and, why something happens. Coming from like an agency background, then starting my own companies, as you know, when you're running your own company, every dollar counts. So you want to make sure that if you're investing $1 into something, you're getting some return better than $1, right? And you have to quantify that.
Yeah.
Which is, obviously the basis of performance marketing in general. And so for me, I've kind of always just been data driven. Like, I don't want to make assumptions. I don't want to think I'm always right. I want to let the data tell the story, right? Let the data guide us into what direction we need to go. And so that's kind of, when I started working with Laseraway, I think the only thing we were doing was Google search, and that was it. I had to beg to get a budget for social. And then, as you kind of progress down that path, it's like, all right, now we need to kind of prove this out. We need to make sure we're making the right decisions. That's kind of like the reason why, I begged to get budget to bring on a BI tool, get away from spreadsheets. It was kind of funny when I first joined, we had this huge spreadsheet, and most of the time, it got to a point where when you try to open it, just crash your computer. It's so big, which is like no way to run a business. If it takes, 10, 15 minutes to open a file just so you can try to understand what's going on. So yeah, I've always tried to instill the idea of leveraging data to help you make your decisions, not going off your gut.
How do you translate that into a culture for the group itself? Is it a small enough group that the people you hire just naturally tend to it, or is there a deliberate way to build that culture into the organization to be data forward and let data tell the story and then calibrate your opinions based on it? How do you translate that into data culture?
So I think, data can be intimidating in general, especially again, if you're like looking at a spreadsheet. If you're like a salesperson, if you're, the president of the company or CEO, you're not necessarily always in the weeds looking at this data. And so I think the best way to get adoption is to make it easy, very, having visualizations where the data is just very easy to consume. Making it to where you don't necessarily need to think, the answer is just kind of presented to you in one graph or another. And so for us, it's like the biggest hurdle was getting the data in there, making sure it was accurate, creating your data sets. And then, we started out with marketing as our focus for data. And then, our president, who I work very closely with, is very data focused as well. And so it's like, as soon as we had our dashboards and, like we have all these interesting things to look at, our COs looking at it, our CEOs looking at it, the sales leaders are looking at it, and they're like, oh, we want this, And so it just kind of evolved throughout the organization. And so now like every single person in our organization is looking at Domo, our BI tool, to get their answers, to understand where their sales are at, what their targets are. It's everyone, all our leadership basically wakes up, grab their phone, pull up the app, see where we're at, see how we did yesterday,
Right. Is that the unlock? Was that the simplicity and trying to like get them the cuts that that everybody wants? Is that where it kind of unlocks adoption?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, from going from that humongous spreadsheet to just being able to understand how marketing's performing on your phone at any time,
right.
Is like everyone kind of, because we were, when we onboarded Domo, it was right after they came out of alpha. And so we were like very early adopters. And at that time, there was Tableau wasn't available. Like there was no data studio. And so, kind of introducing that paradigm, because it was so new, is exciting for people. Right. And so, just having that information at your fingertips was the biggest unlock by far.
Right. Okay. Keary, do you have a similar experience? Do you have some data culture cheat sheets, cheat codes? How do you create data culture in an organization? Is there some secrets to that you've kind of experienced?
Yeah, I don't know if it's a secret, and it may depend on sort of the level of maturity that any particular organization is in. And Paul had it. I can definitely relate to some of what Paul was describing. In my organization, when I got there, like we have a lot of data, and different functional areas actually dug into that data very deeply, but it was all done in silos. Like finance had their own view of everything, operations had their own view of everything, marketing had its own view of everything from third-party platforms and tools, whatever we're getting out of Google Analytics and Google Ads and Facebook and our marketing channel and platform data. But there was no unification. So one of the first things I did was we need to unify like a lot of the operational data, which is really sort of the CRM and sort of the foundational first-party data we have, with all of the third-party ecosystem data, so that we could combine marketing and operations or outcome data from our CRM platform. And given that we're using like the source of truth that is being used by the other areas of the organization, it helps bring them along to understand how marketing's activity is then connected to sort of the operational measures that they're looking at on a daily basis. So it was a little bit more of an evolution and getting people to think a little bit more holistically about all of our data and how it sort of works together, as opposed to everyone sort of working in their own little silo for their own little piece of it. So there's already a good culture.
Is there a challenge when you do? I mean, like for example, I'm just reading this from how Paul describes it, how you describing it, right? When you kind of bring it together, does it overwhelm people? Now, like if you're like a up and coming sort of like a director of whatever it is, finance and marketing, you may not have an understanding of the whole business, and now you have to kind of let the whole business land on you, because now you get to see all of the operational data and all that. Is there some secret to like presenting the holistic view but keeping it consumable?
Yeah, I mean, you have to you have to end up creating some synthesis of that into like an executive dashboard. But I do think, understanding how the sausage is made for people is super important, just to give them the appreciation of the scope and scale of everything that goes into it. Like, you may only be surfacing the key, 15 insights that come out of like thousands of different data points and attributes that are the culmination of, those different systems and data sources being pulled together. So I just find that it's helpful, like, people, if you just show them the dashboard, they wouldn't really appreciate everything that goes into making it. So just as part of, an overall approach to awareness, I found that to be like super helpful. But it could be very, like, it is overwhelming when people first see it, and people are like, oh my God, I didn't realize that there was this many things that went into it. I have my little finance view. I know what our revenue per visit is and everything, but I didn't realize it was connected to all of these other things. So it's a little bit of an eye-opening experience. And then you have to sort of rein it into a manageable, digestible format so people can consume it easily.
So let me take a different angle to it. Like, okay, that's one, or this infrastructure data angle. Let me ask the same question from a different angle, which is, both of your marketers, you're always trying new things, right? Either in terms of creative or media or whatnot. Not everything is going to work, right? Some things are going to work, and you can scale, test, learn, grow, right? Test, maybe like, half the tests you try are going to like bomb and not really provide you, lift upside or whatever it is. And then half may work, and only one or two may actually really work for you to scale the business. So there's a lot of failures if you want to call those failures, right? And you have to test to understand what might work. How do you create the space for that? Is that simple enough? Are there some organizations that come with the space, you can live there, great? Or is there some secret to creating the space for experimentation and data-driven strategy? Is there some ciphers there?
I think being clear about the fact that is the sort of direct purpose and intention behind, if it's, well, we need to carve out like 10% of our budget on an ongoing basis to be able to test, refine, and optimize, or whatever percentage, people are comfortable with, that gives you enough latitude to actually test in a meaningful way that can impact the business moving forward. Like, once you kind of, I think, come up with the framework and help people understand what it is you're doing and why you're doing it. Like, as soon as you see the first couple of successful tests, even though a 50% success rate is actually pretty good. Like, usually it's about 70% will fail, 30% will be successful or whatever. But those ones that are successful, that there's really meaningful, business impact, that when you change it, you can say, making this change, we're getting an incremental X amount of revenue or whatever. Like, people then really understand the value of it. And, if you don't continuously be doing testing, then you're just going to be standing in place eventually, because things will pass you by, and you sort of need to have some kind of culture of testing sort of built into what you do, I think.
Yeah, I think a lot of that too. I was going to say, like, it requires a lot of trust from leadership when you're doing testing. And so it's, to Keary's point, like, once you do have a couple winners and you can prove yourself out, it makes everything so much easier, right? Like, okay, if we're seeing this incremental revenue, that was a great idea. This channel's working phenomenal. Let's see where else we can get some additional juice. But until, like, you can actually, prove yourself or prove the concept, it's a little bit difficult to get those additional funds to go out and test something, especially when you're smaller, right? Because again, like, every dollar counts, and you want to make sure it's all actionable. But, having that culture as you get larger is really important, because that's how you're going to unlock that growth, is through testing. I mean, we test everything.
How do you ask for the trust, Keary and Paul? I mean, if you have the trust, great. I mean, a lot of the times you may not start there. If you many marketers I've talked to don't have the trust, because it's a complex organization. I mean, there's a ton of VC money, and there's a lot of politics, and they're like living in a Shark Tank, right? It is a very different situation for them to execute in. So how do you ask for trust to test and learn and grow when 70% of the tests are not going to pan out, right? And if there's a target on your back, you're constantly like figuring out, okay, what's going to happen if this test fails, right? Or am I reading this wrong? Is there some
No, I think
to...
sometimes it's better to beg for forgiveness than ask permission in a situation like this. So
Yeah.
One sort of baby step way to do it is like without like overtly saying I need to carve out, or I need, you know, an incremental like 10% of budget that I can directly just allocate to testing. If you can do it within your existing sort of executional model without asking for more money to do it, and then you take the wins out of that testing and use that as sort of the business case to say, look, we got this, but I had to use existing funds. You know, if we could have tested this without like having it compromise, you know, our existing business results at all. If we sort of had a little bit of a carve out for it, you know, we got some really good results here. You know, what do you think? And you kind of build the business case for it to try to earn that trust initially, to then, you know, earn the opportunity to have more dedicated budget to specifically allocate to testing if you want to do it that way.
Got it. That's a cool way to think about that. But
I
Paul,
think
is that something?
that's a great way to look at it. Other than, like you said, if you have a target on your back, it's going to be hard to be like, well, I'm going to bet my job on this test, right? But to Carrie's point, you know, you can carve out budget without seeing like a meaningful decline in, say, leads or revenue. Just like when you look at the MMM, it's, you know, if you want to get your ROAS up, you're going to reduce spend. You're going to reduce spend by lowering your target CPA or target ROAS or whatever, or increase your target ROAS. And so it's, you know, it's not a linear relationship. You know, it's not, your leads aren't going to go down like this. They're going to, and so you can carve out those budgets without really affecting the business if you have to do it covertly.
Yeah,
covertly. Okay, it's a great point. Secrets here for real marketers. You know, this is what happens in the throes, in the underbelly of a marketing organization. Now, let's talk about the finance marketing partnership. Right, it's incredibly tricky. I've talked to enough marketers to know that it's dysfunctional in many organizations. What's the secret there? Is there a way to get your finance partner on your side? Is there any good success stories that either one of you have had in your careers? What's the advice you would give to other up and coming marketers?
I like to describe it as keep your friends close and your CFO closer, which is not something that you generally would hear from any marketer. You know, usually finance and marketing are some of the most at odds areas of the organization, because, you know, finance controls all of the budget. Finance controls what is reported to your PE, your board. You know, if you're the Wall Street, if you're a public company, right? So getting aligned with finance to help them understand marketing's contribution, you know, it can only be helpful over time. Now, it's easier said than done, and a lot of it, I think, is you know, instead of it being a adversarial relationship, you know, try to forge a partnership and like ask them questions, have them help. Like if you need to develop like a lifetime value model or a CAC model, or maybe multiple CAC models, depending on, you know, what your business looks like from a regional standpoint or whatever, engaging them to help create those things versus like going to an outside party or whatever to do it can help kind of instill a little bit of collaboration. It also helps them understand that you as a marketer are looking to be very disciplined with how you're investing, you know, the dollars that they're controlling the purse strings on a lot of times. And, you know, if they feel comfortable that you have an understanding of the business from a financial standpoint, and that, you know, you're looking to deliver a return on that it generally goes a long way towards helping that relationship. And they will be a little bit more flexible generally in my experience, but, you know, having them sort of help you, even if you don't really want their help necessarily, but having them help you create some of these things can go a long way in my experience.
Culture of partnership between finance and marketing. Yeah. Paul, what's your secret here?
So I think a lot of it, to Carrie's point, is like over communication, right? You don't want to surprise your CFO with like some poor sales number or just being over budget. So again, it's like, with our CFO, we have dashboard. They have access to our marketing dashboards. They can, come to us anytime to understand what's going on, whether it's seasonality, why something worked, why something didn't work. But in the end too, it's they're not marketers. So they may look at our spend and be like, why are we spending 200,000 on connected TV when it's not making any revenue, right? And so that's why, like, I think sophistication in what you're doing with MMMs, creating dashboards with multipliers to create kind of transparency with actually what's happening with those marketing dollars and where the upside is. Because again, like, looking at the work we've done, going to our CFO and being like, hey, if we reallocate funds, we can increase our quarterly marketing revenue by 15 million. He's going to be like, of course. It's like, as long as you're not telling them your revenue is going down, they're going to be happy. And so, becoming more sophisticated in how you do your allocations and your reporting, I think is really important.
Okay, you've done your stripes with the finance organization over a period of time. Okay, great points. Thank you.
Madan, I did want to chime in. I really liked what Paul was saying earlier, and I wanted to chime in on this one specific aspect where we've had some success, which is it's the data-driven predictive opportunity. So if you can take to that, CEO or the decision maker, a specific opportunity that puts within confidence intervals the potential for success that is what they're asking for, and you can then frame that with that data-driven approach and show them what that looks like in the future should they take a very minimal chance, the money will appear. Because in my experience, there is money. You have to just make the cause for that money to appear. And then you can move forward with a buy-in from everyone and know that what you're doing, the risk has been mitigated. It's a conscientious choice and you're all on board. And that's where we've gotten success.
Yeah.
Great point. Put more data behind it.
Big time conversation right there. So before we wrap this up, let me chime in real quick and crystallize this for you, right? So the first thing I wanted to touch on was how important data culture is. Actually, both Keary and Paul emphasized that. Creating data culture within an organization, the need for using it in day-to-day decisions, and how to drive business growth with it, right? So Paul actually said he's always been curious about how things work, why things happen. And data usually is the answer for those kind of questions, right? It shows businesses exactly what's going well, what's going wrong, and how to really fix that. He also mentioned that implementing a data-focused culture was especially easier in Laseraway, where he is, because the founder himself is a data guy, right? He already subscribes to it, he believes in it, he doesn't think it's voodoo magic, right? So he gets the picture. And Keary mentioned that it was a unifying force operationally and really helps employees from different departments understand the marketing data, understand the overall business, and this creates that unity, that teamwork that fosters the culture as a whole, right? It really helps bring the organization forward. And actually, according to PwC, data-driven organizations actually outperform their competitors by 6% in profitability and 5% in productivity. This shows that they know what's going on and are able to act on it accordingly, right? The study also showed that data-driven organizations are 162% more likely to surpass revenue goals and are 58% more likely to beat their revenue goals compared to their non-data-driven counterparts. So this shows just data is the way, and companies are realizing this. So, and statistically, 81% of organizations also agree that data should be at the heart of all business decision making, right? The age of CEOs functioning on gut feeling is largely dead. Because now we have actual quantitative metrics that can figure out what needs to be done. And the next thing was marketing has to work in tandem with finance. So this involves thorough communication and gaining the trust of the CFO or finance leaders, basically the guys that control the money and the resources. And it's the job of analytics minds to show them how to best spend that money. So Keary actually said, quote, keep your friends close and the CFO closer, which I think is such a great way of saying like there needs to be a strong relationship with the finance team. Paul also made a great point about that. He mentioned the significance of transparency within finance. So to have access to marketing dashboards and be able to engage with real-time ongoing discussions about marketing efforts so that both sides are in the loop, right? And then the last thing that everyone touched on was just continuous testing and experimentation, right? You need the right sample sizes. One experiment isn't the end all be all. It's not put in stone after that one result, right? You need to continue to test, continue to adapt to changing demographics, other changing factors and things like that. And it figure out like what to test for even, right? Some tests are they compound on each other, right? Maybe a certain geographic market is highlighted in one of the tests and it has to be looked at in greater detail, right? So Paul actually mentions the need for trust, and that's built over time through these repeated tests, right? It's an iterative process. I think Keary also advised to seek proactive ways of experimentation to showcase results from successful tests. So this can lead to like increased flexibility, budget allocations for future testing, and ultimately a successful business which, benefits everybody involved, right? So just to wrap this up really quickly, melding marketing with modern data tools is that iterative process, the continuous process of learning, or like what I like to call it, the Mamba mentality of attribution. But 81% of businesses have figured it out, right? The holy grail is data, and that's the key to success right now. But till next time, it's been your RJ Karthik. It's been real, and I'll catch you guys in the next episode.